This is a sleeve block. I'm going to show you how to draft this from custom measurements. This video follows on from my menswear body block video, so if you haven't watched that, you're about to be very confused. To start, you will need measurements. The circumference of the upper bicep, BC. The length of your arm from the top of your shoulder to just under the wrist, L. And the size of the armhole, A. To find A, you'll need your body block. Walk your tape measure from the shoulder point, following the sleeve curve to the side seam. Double this measurement to get the armhole size. Now, lay out your paper. I've still got some of this patterning paper to hand, but use anything that is available to you. On the left-hand side of the paper, draw a line slightly longer than L. Mark the top of this line 1. From 1, strike a line at right angles. On this new line, measure BC from 1 and mark this point as 2. On the original line, measure L from 1 and mark this point 3. Square across from 2 and 3 to create a rectangle. Mark where they intersect as 4. Find the halfway point between 1 and 2 and mark this 5. Mark the halfway points between 1 and 5 and 5 and 2. And strike lines at right angles from each of these points. The rectangle should now be divided into 4 equally sized, thinner rectangles. This is your back underarm seam, back line, centre line, front line, and front underarm seam. You can now move on to the sleeve head. Divide A by 3 and measure this distance from 1 towards 3 and mark this point as 6. Square across, and where this line intersects the back line, mark it as 7. Where it intersects the front line, mark it as 8. And where this line intersects the front underarm seam, mark as 9. Divide A by 6 and add 15 millimeters. Measure this distance up from 7 and mark this as point 10. This is the back pitch point. Divide A by 6 and measure this distance up from 8 and mark as 11. This is the front pitch point. This additional height in the back of the sleeve head allows the arm to move forward in the garment. We can now plot out the curve of the sleeve head. Connect 6 to 10 with a straight line. Find the halfway point between 6 and 10 and strike a line towards 7 at right angles from this point. Measure 5 millimeters in and mark this point as 12. Now, draw a straight line connecting 10 and 5. Again, find the centre point and strike a line at right angles towards 1. Measure 15 millimeters and mark this point 13. Connect 5 and 11 with a straight line. Find the centre point, strike a line at right angles towards 2 and measure 20 millimeters and mark this point 14. Finally, connect 11 to 9 with a straight line. Find the centre point, strike at right angles towards 7 and measure in 10 millimeters and mark this point 15. You can now connect points 6, 12, 10, 13, 5, 14, 11, 15 and 9 with a flowing curve. When finished, this should make a bell curve. At this point, you can measure your sleeve head by walking your tape measure around the curve. It should be 25 millimeters longer than your A measurement. This extra fabric is distributed between the pitch points to give shape to the sleeve head and can be modified during fitting. The last step is to taper in your sleeves. As this is a basic pattern to draft future patterns from, I'm going to give this a fairly neutral shape. I measure in 20 millimeters from 3 and 4 and connect these points with 6 and 9 to create new front and back underarm seams. And you're done. At this point, you'll probably want to go back to your body block and mark the front and back pitch points. Measure 11 centimeters from 13 and mark where that intersects with the sleeve hole. This is your back pitch point. To do this, you are swinging an arc with 13 as the centre point. Repeat this with an 8cm measurement to find your front pitch point. Mark these 2 points differently with a single and double notch, and make sure you will remember which is which. But the back pitch point will usually be higher. It's important to note that the sleeve block and body block have been drafted without seam allowance, but I'll cover all that in the next film where I cut a toile, fit it, and modify the patterns to match the fitting.